Okay, so now we're recording and we're going to be looking at the readings for the first Sunday in Lent. And we're going to start with the reading from Genesis. And Jim Owen has volunteered to read the first reading for us. So, oh, and while he does this, we listen and we jot down any words, phrases, or images that come to us while Jim is reading.
Reading from the book of Genesis. God said to Noah and to his sons with him, "See, I'm now establishing my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that was with you, all of the birds, the various tame and wild animals that were with you and came out of the ark. I will establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all bodily creatures be destroyed by the waters of a flood. There shall not be another flood to devastate the earth." God added, "This is the sign that I am giving for all ages to come of the covenant between me and you and every living creature with you. I set my bow in the clouds to serve as a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I bring clouds over the earth and the bow appears in the clouds, I will recall the covenant I have made between me and you and all living things, so that the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all mortal beings."
Okay, so just feel free to jump in and say whatever word or phrase or image came to you while Jim was reading.
Covenant, bow in the sky, sign of covenant, rainbow.
Thank you.
Establishing a covenant with you.
You got to get closer.
Okay.
Devastate the earth.
Never again.
I don't know. Just get closer. Try again.
Okay. And then after you talk, be sure to mute yourself so you don't keep popping in on the recording.
You're not muted.
Every living creature.
Every living creature.
I'm going to add covenant between me and you.
Okay. So I'll echo a little bit of our tradition now. So there are two main versions of the flood story in the Bible, and they are blended together in Genesis chapters 6 to 9. There are interesting differences. For instance, in one version, Noah takes one pair of animals into the ark, one pair of each type of animal. So like 2 horses, 2 dogs, etc. In the other version, Noah takes 7 pairs of clean animals into the ark and only 1 pair of unclean animals. The first version, although God's name, which was Yahweh, most Bibles will read Lord, more on this shortly. Although God's name was not revealed until the time of Moses, one version portrays Noah in relationship with Yahweh, with the Lord. Scholars call this the J version. This was first noticed by German scholars, and they spelled Yahweh with a J. This version was probably written down about 950 years before Christ at the time of King David or Solomon. The second version of the flood story is the passage that we read today does not use the divine name. Noah is portrayed as being in relationship with God. This version was probably written about 550 BC during the Babylonian exile. Uh, the author of this version does not use the divine name in his story until after it is revealed to Moses. Uh, uh, okay, let's see. The main concerns of this author are priestly. Some of these concerns are like covenant and creation, and also sacrifices will come out. So the priestly author and covenant. The J author knows of only one covenant, the Mosaic covenant at Mount Sinai. That was the original experience. And what happened then was, because this was their experience, those who had been at Sinai, they started imagining their previous ancestors also had covenants with God. So the priestly author portrays God in covenant relationship with humanity even before the time of Moses. He portrays a covenant with Abraham. He also portrays a covenant with Noah, and this is a covenant with all humanity and with all creation. The J author speaks rather of a promise to Noah rather than a covenant with him. Covenants are sealed by sacrifice. This is why the author needs more than one pair of clean animals in his story. Some of them are going to be sacrificed to God when the covenant is made at the end of the flood story. Imagine a poor set of animals who managed to get onto the ark, be one of the lucky ones that are saved, and then at the end they get sacrificed to God and they all go extinct. Okay, so that's why the priestly author, he knew he was going to have Noah making sacrifice, so he has 7 pairs of clean animals going on. Of course, you can't sacrifice unclean animals, so you didn't have to worry about that. The priestly author and creation. The priestly author wrote the 6th-day creation story that we have in Genesis 1. There, God is portrayed as making order out of chaos. For instance, he makes a firmament, which is a solid sky, to divide the waters above the heavens from the waters below the heavens. If you would have asked the ancients, why is the sky so blue? Well, it's because of all the water on top of it. Of course, that's what makes it blue. They didn't know about light refracting and stuff like that. So P portrays the flood as the undoing of creation, as the return of primeval chaos as the result of human sin. In the liturgical context, when we bless holy water, one of my favorite phrases is, the waters of the great flood made an end of sin and a new beginning of goodness. So this is appropriate in Lent, because Lent is a time when, first of all, new Christians or people who are going to be new Christians are preparing for baptism. And secondly, those who are already Christians we remember our baptism, and we're going to renew our baptismal promises at Easter. So this theme of the waters of the flood being related to baptism is going to be picked up with the second reading. In ordinary time, the second reading has no connection whatsoever with the first reading, unless it's just an accident. In Lent, often the second reading relates to the first reading or to the gospel or even to both of them. So let's see. So this is a time when we have questions, comments, or observations.
Father,
Yo.
it's on your very last comment. Can you elaborate on how they relate to the readings relate to each other? You said during Lent.
Okay. So first of all, in ordinary time, the first reading is chosen to go with the gospel. And the second reading, we're just reading along passages through of Paul. And if they happen to have something to do with the gospel, that's just a happy accident. Nobody planned it that way. That's ordinary time. But there are three kinds of time in the Catholic Church. There's Advent, Christmas time, and there's Lent, Easter time. And anything else is just ordinary time. So if we're in Advent, Lent, or Advent, Lent, or Christmas, Easter, often all three readings are on the same theme. So some priests and preachers and musicians drive themselves crazy trying to find out what's the theme of all three readings on the second Sunday of Ordinary Time. There isn't one, okay? Whereas often in Lent, Easter, and Advent, Christmas, there is a common theme. And so we're going to see like covenant and baptism and things like that are going to be, these kind of themes are going to be tying it all together. Great question. Thank you.
Father Pat,
Yes.
I've always been struck by this verse 14. It's like the author is trying to make God seem forgetful. That it takes a sign in the sky to remind him, oh yeah, I'm not going to destroy the earth.
There you go. And actually, I'm going to comment on that. I won't say too much more right now because I am going to comment on that on my next presentation when we do the psalm. But notice, you nailed it. The rainbow isn't to remind us. It's a reminder for God. Yeah, if you read closely, and it shall come about when I bring, let's see, when I bring clouds over the earth and the bow appears in the clouds, this is New American Revised, I will remember my covenant. There you go. So it's not to remind us of the covenant, it's to remind God of his covenant. And also, since you brought it up, the great German Lutheran scholar Joachim Jeremias wrote a book on the Eucharistic words of Jesus. And the passage that says, do this in remembrance of me. That does not mean do it so that you human beings will remember Jesus. It's do this so that God will remember me. Do this so that God will remember that I die on the cross tomorrow and all that I've done for you. That's the original meaning of do this in remembrance of me. I'm going to talk a little more about remembering in the next, when we do the psalm. Excellent point there. Any other comments or observations or questions?
Along that same line, Father, just before that, he says, when I set my bow in the clouds, and then he says, it will remind me. So he had to, excuse that.
Yeah.
I have to put up with that every week.
Uh,
You know, he sets his bow in the clouds. So he, you know, that's almost like he knows that it's a reminder. And then it says, you know, then it'll remind me.
right.
So, you know,
And
it's kind of confusing to me.
okay. What's probably behind this is in the ancient creation stories in the ancient world that Israel steals from and applies them to the true God. Often creation is portrayed as a battle between a god or gods and the gods of chaos, the gods of order and the gods of chaos. And one of the main weapons then was a bow. So when you hang your bow up, that's like a gunslinger hanging his guns on the wall. The battle is over. So whenever God hangs his bow up, you know, if he's been fighting bad gods for a while, eventually the Jews are just going to believe in one God. But in the early days, they didn't. The Lord was their God, and which is why the Ten Commandments say, you shall not have any other gods besides me. Now, if there weren't a lot of other gods out there, that would be just a stupid commandment. But so if he's been out fighting bad gods and he hangs his bow up, that's going to remind him. So it's probably a remnant of an earlier version where divine combat was part of the creation story. The creation story that we have it, as we have it in Genesis now, is just by a word. The Lord said, let there be light, and there was light. But in some of the Psalms and some of the poetry of the prophets, you get that image of the Lord as divine warrior engaging in bringing order out of chaos. It's a more ancient version of the creation story. Great point.
Father,
Yes.
this is Margie.
Uh-huh.
It sort of seems to me like maybe they think he's not really paying a whole lot of attention or forgetful. That, you know, okay, I got to put this up here so I remember.
Well, that's
It's almost
exactly
like
what
maybe they're worried.
See, yes, when you read the text, read what the text says, and that's exactly what you're doing. And they wouldn't have written that if they weren't worried that he might forget. And so I'm going to talk a little more on that short.
Father,
Yes.
This is just how the readings hit me in today, in today, in light of the pandemic that we're undergoing now. The devastation was of the whole earth in the readings.
Uh-huh.
We have a disease that is affecting the entire earth right now. So that's what hit me in the really my mind. The other thing is a distraction in my mind in that my maiden name is Flood. So every time the word comes up, there's this, oh no, that's not what we're talking about.
All kinds of, yes. But the other thing, we've had that terrible disaster, I think, over in India, where the glacier and what it reminds, a flood like that, it reminds us of how we're victims of forces beyond our control. That's the image, and that's your exact point with the pandemic, and even with all of our technology and everything, it's going to be tough for us. And God forbid that the virus mutate into something more deadly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But before we get enough people vaccinated. So let's see. So we're going to hear the text again, and this time Margie's going to read it from the Jerusalem Bible. And I'm just double checking, Margie, is this a Jerusalem Bible or a New Jerusalem Bible?
It's the Jerusalem Bible.
Okay, yeah.
It belonged to my husband's Aunt Frances.
Okay, and from seeing it there, I read that one back when I was an undergraduate seminarian. Yes, that's the one I read. Okay.
God spoke to Noah and his sons. See, I establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you. Also with very living creature to be found with you, birds, cattle, and every wild beast with you, everything that came out of the ark, everything that lives on the earth. I establish my covenant with you. No thing of flesh shall be swept away by the waters of the flood. There shall be no flood to destroy the earth again. God said, here is the sign of the covenant I will make between myself and you, and every living creature with you for all generations. I will set my bow in the clouds, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When I gather the clouds over the earth and the bow appears in the clouds, I will recall the covenant between myself and you and every living creature of every kind. And so the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all things of flesh.
Okay. So when we hear that, what is the good news that we hear? That we hear and that the first readers heard back 500 years before Jesus.
Never again.
Okay, never again.
And I think some of the good news is that he's basically saying never will again will he destroy all of humanity or all of, everything on the earth. I read it as there might be some things come along that are nasty, but nothing from here on out will wipe out the whole earth again.
Okay.
Well, I think he's specific about that. He said never again by a flood. What I heard him say, that never again will I destroy the earth by flood.
I remember you're reminding me when I was a little boy, I think in the third grade, and the Irish assistant pastor was coming around and he was talking about the flood, and someone said, and God's not going to destroy the earth again by flood. And he said, yes. How is God going to destroy it the next time? All of us were in third grade. By fire. Scared the pee-pee out of us.
And they're always talking about the meteor that's going to hit us. Fire.
And in another 5 billion years, the sun is going to be much bigger than it is right now, and we'll probably be inside of it. Mercury will be inside of it. Venus will be inside of it. All the oceans of the world will boil away. A lot of the Earth will be turned to magma if we miss the sun. But the other possibility is if it gets just a little bit bigger, we will go up in a wisp of smoke being inside the sun. That's 5 billion years from now. So, yeah, the modern scientific ideas of the end of the earth are more in tune with the fire image than the water image. Okay, let's see. Oh, and what's the challenge? How does the challenge? How does the text challenge us? And what is the pain and bondage and brokenness in the human situation touched by this text? I think some of it is what Mary Ellen was saying earlier, that we're subject to forces beyond our control. The world's a dangerous place. Pandemic and all. Okay, well, I'm going to stop our recording here on the first readings and stop